Chapter 1. The Circle of Judgment. The High Chamber of the Guardian Council sat in silence. Crystal windows reflected the twin moons of Alfheim, bathing the circular room in silver light. The air was heavy with tension, the kind that coiled around the throat and made even the most seasoned councillor hesitate before speaking. Every seat was filled. The council, all 8 members, had convened in full, and for good reason. Aeliana had appeared. She had not denied the charge. She had stood tall and unflinching before them, and admitted freely she broke her guardian oath. Now she and the Wolf of Earth were gone from the chamber, excused after their testimony. The doors had sealed, and what remained was silence, broken only by the breath of judgment hanging in the air. "She admits it," Councillor Valeth said, finally. Her voice cut clean and sharp. She broke the oath. She interfered in mortal affairs, wielded the Staff of Light in violation of her vows. This is not rumour. This is fact. She acted to save lives, Thera countered, rising to her feet. Her robe shimmered with woven runes of authority. The threat to the balance was undeniable. She did not act for selfish gain. "Intentions do not erase consequences," Ressa snapped. She placed one man above the balance. One mortal. "He's no ordinary mortal," murmured Councillor Leren from the northern arc of the ring. "He's the Wolf of Earth. We've seen what he carries. We've seen what follows him." The murmur that followed that statement felt like a cold wind blowing through the chamber. At the centre of the circle stood Malorian. He had not moved. He had not spoken. Until now. Enough. It was a single word. Soft, unyielding. It silenced the room. Malorian turned to face them all. His presence, as always, carried weight, not of arrogance, but of experience. The room bent toward him without meaning to. She did not break her oath lightly. She did not do it for love or impulse. She did it because she saw something we refused to see. The balance was already fraying, the threat already here. She chose to act, not to wait. Ressa scoffed. And what of precedent? What of law? Valeth stood. Her tone was quieter now, more reflective. And what of prophecy? A hush fell. Thandor rose beside her. "We 3 have carried this burden alone for too long. We believed silence was protection, that ignorance might delay fate. We were wrong." Gasps rippled through the chamber, eyes widened. "You mean to speak of the—" "No," Malorian interrupted firmly. "We will not reveal it. Not to them. Not to this chamber." Confusion broke into hushed argument. Whispers turned to debate. Malorian raised a hand. "They must not know." "Not yet. If they act with knowledge of prophecy, they cease to act with free will. Everything we have seen, everything we fear, comes faster if they are made aware." Valeth nodded. "We will protect them. Guide where we must. But the truth stays here." Thandor's gaze moved across the room, settling each voice one by one. "And let it be known," he said, "that this council is not divided." The 3 senior councillors stepped forward in unison, moving to the centre of the ring. They did not shout, they did not raise their arms, they stood, together, and the chamber stilled. Malorian spoke last. "She will not be punished. She will not be exiled. And she will not be questioned further. This council may grumble, may fear, may worry, but it will not stand in her way." His gaze swept the ring. The balance has already shifted. The only question that remains is whether we will survive it. In the silence that followed, no one argued, until Councillor Ressa broke it again. "But something must be done," she insisted. "She pled guilty and accused us of inaction. She is not wrong, but we cannot ignore this either." Leren leaned forward. We walk a blade's edge. Exile is out of the question. That would fracture everything. Demotion could create an even greater rift. The other Guardians are watching, closely. If we mishandle this, the entire Order risks splintering. Then perhaps, Thera offered gently, we do not punish, we redefine. Silence again. Curious, listening, she continued. Alfheim needs a voice in the realms now more than ever. An ambassador, a bridge between the Guardian Order and the fractured alliances beyond. Send her as emissary? Valeth asked, brow furrowed. No, Thera said. Not send. Appoint. Publicly. Formally. Let it be seen not as exile but elevation. Let her carry our intentions to the 5 realms. Let her succeed or fail with our name at her back. Melarion folded his hands behind his back. Aeliana Vale. Guardian. Oathbreaker. Saviour. What she did cannot be undone, but perhaps it can be repurposed. And in the quiet that followed, the council began to shift. Not toward punishment, not toward shame, toward change. Chapter 2. The Wolf's Shadow Moves. The sun filtered through reinforced glass panels, casting a warm amber hue across Gunner's office. But something was off. Clara sat behind the desk, reviewing open intelligence reports. Her fingers tapped absently against a tablet, eyes flicking across messages from field agents, scouts, and realm liaisons. There was nothing conclusive on Syrian, nothing on the Spectre Wolf, just quiet, too quiet. The door slid open behind her with a hiss. Darren strolled in, Eli behind him. He paused just a few steps in, blinking slowly at the room. Huh? Clara didn't look up. What? This place is clean, Darren said, stepping further in. Like, cleaned by someone with a plan. Even the liquor cabinet's full of healthy crap now. What is that? Kombucha? Celestial berry extract? Eli shrugged, mildly impressed. That's beet juice. And, she squinted, some kind of protein elixir labelled wolf fuel. Clara set the datapad down. Gunner's recovering. The least we could do is make sure his office didn't smell like desperation and whiskey. Fair, Darren muttered. Still, I liked desperate whiskey. Get to the point, Clara said, folding her hands. Darren and Eli exchanged a look. Eli stepped forward first. We've been watching the safehouses, the realm traffic, the void crystal circuits, nothing. But Rose reached out last night. She has a lead. Clara arched a brow. Rose has a lot of leads. This one's different, Darren said. She didn't just say she heard something. She said Commander Cael Varnor heard something. That earned Clara's full attention. He's still active? Very, Eli confirmed. And apparently, he's started building a proper network in Concordia. Black Dawn movements, portal breaches, hidden deals. He's got eyes where we don't. Darren rested his hand on the desk. It's time we stop waiting. Syrian's gone underground, but someone like Varna. He doesn't sniff shadows. If he's asking to talk, it's because he's found something worth moving on. Clara leaned back slowly. You planned this? Maybe, Eli said innocently. Caleb and Alatheris already agreed to hold down our positions while we're gone, Darren added. Caleb's handling logistics and security. Alatheris is covering the lab and workshop systems. Omega padded into the room, silent as a breeze, and nudged Clara's hand with his snout. Clara glanced down at him, then stood. She looked at the desk, at the clean lines and the sunlight streaming in, and then out at the future still cloaked in shadow. Prep the gear, she said. Tell Caleb we leave at nightfall. If Cael has something, her eyes narrowed, then it's time Concordia starts talking. Later that afternoon, Clara made her way down the hallway to the operations wing. The doors to the field command room slid open, revealing Desera leaning over a series of tactical maps, her prosthetic leg propped up on the edge of the console. You're not here to ask for help reprogramming anything, are you? Desera asked without looking up. Nope, Clara said, stepping in. I'm here to hand you the reins. That got Desera's attention. Clara crossed her arms. Darren, Eli, Omega, and I are heading to Concordia. We've got a lead from Cael Varnor through Rose. Might be something. Might be nothing. Either way, we're chasing it. Desera stood straight, watching her closely. You're in charge while we're gone. Caleb's handling logistics. Alatheris is watching the lab. But you, Clara gave a small nod, you're the spine while we're out. You've got command clearance. Use it. Desera gave a slow nod. About damn time someone trusted me with the keys. Don't wreck the place, Clara said. No promises, Desera replied, grinning. They clasped forearms in a firm, mutual nod of respect before Clara turned to go. War never slept, but neither did the pack. Evening fell. The secure portal chamber hummed softly, its rune-lined walls lit in slow pulses of blue and silver. The ley line stabilizers were already primed, and the portal arch shimmered faintly, waiting. Clara stepped in first, staff of light strapped across her back and her P90 slung across her chest. Her pack was tightly secured, armor adjusted and form-fitting for mobility. Omega padded in beside her, alert but calm. Darren followed, hauling a hefty pack of gear and weapons, his shotgun riding at his back. He gave Clara a once-over and smirked. Nice staff. Still carrying the P92? Overachiever. Redundancy, Clara said flatly. You should try it. Eli entered last, her gauntlet bracer glowing with active enchantments. A small drone orb hovered beside her, scanning the portal with soft pulses. All readings are clean, Eli said. We're green to go. Darren cracked his knuckles. Concordia, here we come. Clara took one final look back at the chamber. Let's find out what Cael's sitting on, she said, stepping toward the light, and with that they disappeared through the portal. Chapter 3. Mirrors and Ghosts. The portal flared, casting a wash of pale silver across the smooth obsidian floor. The chamber was circular, lined with mirrors that didn't reflect quite right. Instead of bouncing back their images, they shimmered with faint silhouettes, echoes of what had once passed through. Clara stepped out first, her boots striking stone with confident weight. The staff of light rested across her back, and her P90 hung securely against her chest. Omega emerged beside her, alert but composed, ears swiveling to track the room's energy. Eli followed, her eyes scanning the glyphs carved into the walls. A satisfied nod. Stabilizers are running clean. She's got this place warded tighter than a vault. Rose doesn't play around, Darren muttered as he stepped out last, adjusting the strap on his gear pack, especially when it's her name on the door. The portal shimmered closed behind them. For a moment all was still, then the main doors opened. Jiro stepped in, hands clasped behind his back, dressed in polished dark robes lined with mirror-threaded embroidery. He offered a respectful bow. Welcome to the House of Silver Mirrors. Lady Rose is expecting you. Clara nodded. Lead on. They moved as a unit through the halls. Every wall seemed to breathe with arcane surveillance, Eli occasionally flicking her bracer to adjust scan filters. Omega remained close to Clara's side, though his golden eyes swept every corridor like a sentinel. As they turned a corner, Darren slowed. His eyes caught on a lone figure at the far end of a hall, pale, poised, and too familiar. Lady Vess. She met his gaze for only a second, her expression unreadable. Then she turned and disappeared through another doorway. Clara glanced sideways at him. Problem. Darren didn't answer right away. Just exhaled through his nose. Nah, just ghosts. The doors to the war chamber opened with a quiet hiss. Rose was already inside. She lounged across a high-backed velvet chair like it was a throne she didn't want, but dared anyone to take. Her boots were kicked up on the obsidian table. A crystal tumbler half full of something red twirled slowly in her fingers. Her crimson hair was braided loosely, and she looked amused. Well, well, she said, not rising. Look who dragged their muddy boots across my wards. Technically, Darren said, stepping in first, it was Omega. We blame the wolf. Rose's gaze flicked to the dire wolf. I'm sure he's the most civilized one in the group. Clara moved forward with precision. Thanks for opening the gate. We've come following a lead you sent through Darren. I figured you might. Rose stood, finally, fluid, graceful, dangerous in the way of women who knew exactly who they were. She gave Clara a nod of mutual respect. Nice to see you again, Alpha Phelan. Likewise. Eli offered a small wave from the side. Security's looking solid. You've made some upgrades since I was last here, Rose smirked. Only the best. You know how I like my toys. Darren leaned a hip against the edge of the war table. Still hiding wine in fancy decanters? It's blood orange juice, Rose said sweetly. My liver thanks me. And here I thought we bonded over bad life choices. We did? Her voice softened only slightly. I just decided I like my life better when I'm not running from it. There was a beat of silence. Then Rose turned her attention back to Clara. Cael Varnor is en route. I called in a favour. He'll arrive tonight and brief you on what he's found. Until then, she motioned to the room. You're guests of the house. Relax. Eat. Sharpen your claws. Clara nodded once. We appreciate the hospitality. As Jiro stepped in to escort them to their quarters, Darren lagged behind just a second. Rose caught it. She looked at him sideways. Still mad I left? I'm not mad, he said casually. Just mildly traumatized. You say you like me and then vanish through a portal. That's messed up. She tilted her head. Would you have said it back? He grinned. Not the point. She smiled, slow and dangerous. Then don't bring it up if you can't play the game, Darren. Game's not over, he murmured as he followed the others out. Behind him, Rose watched, expression unreadable, as the door closed. The mirrors in the room flickered once, and then silence. That evening, the lights in the war chamber dimmed to a soft amber glow as the table activated, veins of light pulsing through carved obsidian. Rose stood alone at first, arms folded, gaze distant. Then the doors opened. Lyra entered silent as always, her cloak trailing behind her like smoke. Her blades were clean, her boots silent. Evening, she said, tone low. You're late, Rose replied, not unkindly. I was watching the walls. Behind her, Lady Vess stepped in. Her gaze passed over Rose and Lyra, then lowered respectfully. They took their seats around the table. Rose exhaled slowly. Cael's on his way. He'll deliver the meat, but we need to set the stage. Movements in the wastes, Lyra said. Ghost markers going silent. No sign of Black Dawn emblems, but the silence feels familiar. Someone's waking something, Vess murmured, and it's not content to stay hidden much longer. Rose nodded. Let's see what Cael brings to the table. But until then, we prepare. Quietly. Outside, the shadows deepened, and Concordia waited. Elsewhere in the house, the pack was settling in. The guest suite was spacious, sleek marble, high-arched ceilings, and wall-length windows that shimmered with protective glyphs. Clara moved methodically through the room, unpacking gear and laying out a perimeter with quiet efficiency. Omega padded to the rug by the hearth and circled before laying down, his tail flicking lazily. Eli was already interfacing with one of the room's arcane terminals, syncing her bracer with the house's surveillance systems. She wasn't kidding, Eli murmured. The whole estate's laced with hybrid protocols. This place is a fortress wearing a ball gown, Clara smirked faintly. Good. I'd hate to sleep in a death trap. Darren stood near the door, quiet for once, his gaze distant. You're thinking about her, Clara said without looking up. I saw Vess, he muttered. She was just here, like nothing ever happened. She's still under Rose's leash, Eli offered. That hasn't changed. Darren scratched the back of his neck. Yeah, well, I've got questions, and she's got answers. Clara gave him a level look. Don't start a fire in someone else's house. He grinned. Wouldn't dream of it. And then he slipped out, silent as a shadow. Behind him, Omega lifted his head. Clara sighed. This is going to be a long night. Darren moved through the halls like a ghost, his footfalls silent on polished stone. The Silver Mirror's estate was alive with wards and whispers, but he'd been in worse places, under worse circumstances. He didn't ask questions. He followed instinct. And sure enough, it led him to a quiet corner balcony overlooking the inner courtyard. Lady Vess stood there, hands clasped at her back, moonlight painting her silver and shadow. She didn't turn when he approached. "I wondered how long it would take," she said quietly. "You always did know how to draw attention," Darren replied, stepping beside her. A pause. "You're not here to make a scene," she said. "No," he answered. "I'm here to ask you one question." Finally, she turned to him, eyes as sharp as ever. "Why'd you come back?" Vess exhaled. "Because Rose didn't kill me." "That's it?" "It's enough." Darren's jaw tightened. "You betrayed us. You stood there while Trinity, Syrian, sold us out. You nearly got her killed. You nearly got Gunnar killed." "And I paid for it," Vess said, voice steady. "In Alfheim, in ways you'll never know." They stood in silence, the weight of old wars hanging between them. Finally, Darren nodded once. "You get one shot. Screw it up and I won't be so forgiving." Vess didn't flinch. Understood. And for the first time in years, they stood side by side, not as enemies, but as uneasy allies. Behind them, the tower bell chimed once. Cael Varnor had arrived. Chapter 4. The Shadow and the Shield. The House of Silver Mirrors. Meeting room's air was thick with tension, still humming from the last discussion. Then a chime, 3 notes, sharp, deliberate. Rose looked up, right on time. The chamber doors opened with a soft hiss. Commander Cael Varnor stepped through. He didn't look like much. No shimmering cloak or high-polish armor. Just a weathered jacket, muted tones, travel-worn boots, and a collar turned up against the world. Dust clung to the hem, and his satchel looked like it had been stitched back together more times than it should have survived. His hair was trimmed short but not sharp. His presence was quiet but unmistakable. He didn't need shine to make an entrance. Lyra tensed from her spot by the wall. Rose stood. "Commander Varnor." Cael nodded with the simplicity of a man who didn't believe in wasting movement. "Lady Rose?" His voice was quiet, unhurried, cutting through the room with more weight than volume. Eli, seated at a console near the arcane map, whispered to Clora. "He's got that Gunnar vibe." No announcement, just gravity. Clora inclined her head. Even Omega stirred, lifting his snout briefly. Darren raised an eyebrow. "Thought you'd come in wrapped in shadow steel." Cael glanced at him. "And draw every eye." "I like walking through cities without notice." Rose gave a knowing smile. "Still a ghost." He set a hardened data pack on the polished glass table. "I came with proof. 3 former Black Dawn safehouses, 2 burned out. 1 emptied recently. Evidence of magical relay points. Someone tried to restart an anchor. It failed, violently. Glyphs lit the surface of the table. Coordinates, sigil residue, arcane energy echoes. Eli leaned forward. "I've seen traces of this pattern." They were trying to piggyback a ley line surge. Cael nodded. They weren't skilled enough to pull it off. But someone's testing the old infrastructure. He keyed another file. "Ravina. These are pre-capture logs. Void stone refinements, supernatural suppression formulas, and acquisition orders that predate her fall. One of her field contacts is still active. Haven't pinned the name yet." Clora's voice was firm. "We need that name." "I'll get it." Rose's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the table. "She's locked up in Alfheim." "But I doubt she's staying quiet forever." Lyra pushed off the wall, arms folded. "You want to go chat with her? See if she hands you answers in a gift box?" Cael's gaze was even. "Interrogations require patience, not daggers." Lyra smiled, sharp and unfriendly. "You sound just like the council." "I'm nothing like them," Cael said. "But I still know the difference between a threat and a witness." The tension crackled. Rose lifted her hand. "Enough. Save it for the next meeting." Clora stepped in. What's your recommendation? Strike the safe house sites, quietly. I can give you access routes. Just be aware, void stone residue is heavy near the third site. Protective enchantments recommended. Darren gave a grim nod. We'll be ready. Cael looked at him. Good. I'd hate to lose the only guy here who laughs at his own jokes. A flicker of amusement passed between them. But Rose didn't miss the undercurrent. That same blend of restraint, calculation and weight, it was something Gunnar carried too. And Rose. She felt it, like a pulse she'd known too long to misplace. She said nothing, but her eyes stayed on Cael for just a beat longer. He noticed, didn't comment, just turned back to the map. There's one more thing, Cael said. During one of my sweeps, I followed a trail near one of the safe houses. Locals wouldn't speak, not directly, but I heard whispers. He tapped another file. Of a child. Young, powerful, unnatural. Was seen briefly, then gone. Vanished. The timing lines up with Syrian's movements. That drew silence. Lyra stiffened. Clora narrowed her eyes. Darren muttered, Hell. Eli looked to Rose. Could it be? Rose's voice was cold steel. Don't say it yet. Not until we know more. Cael let the file close. That's all I have. For now. But Clora didn't let it end there. Commander, she asked, if we go after these safe houses, do you have anyone who can guide us in? Cael hesitated, just for a breath. No one I trust who's still standing. Darren leaned forward. What about you? Cael's eyes flicked to him, then to Clora, then Rose. I'll go, he said simply. If you're serious about hitting these places, I'll guide the first op. But I don't play politics. I go where the mission leads. Clora nodded slowly. Then we're agreed. Pack your gear. The meeting resumed with new purpose, and far beneath the silver mirrors the storm kept building. Chapter 5. Ghosts in the Ashes. The meeting had ended, but the energy in the room lingered. Clora pulled Cael aside by the hallway just outside the chamber. Darren leaned against the stone arch, watching them, arms crossed casually. We'll need eyes in the dark, Darren said. If those safe houses have any leftover security or traps, we're going to want someone who knows how to move unseen. Cael raised an eyebrow. You want Lyra? I want results, Darren replied. And she gets them. She also burns bridges, Cael muttered. Clora nodded grimly. She's a wild card. Unpredictable. Doesn't take orders well. Darren shrugged. Yeah, but she's our wild card. Cael's gaze drifted toward the far end of the corridor, where Lyra leaned against a pillar, sharpening a blade with calm intensity. She hadn't been invited into this part of the conversation, but clearly she didn't need to be. She comes, Clora said after a moment, but under command. No solo runs, no vanishing without report. If she disobeys, I pull her. Hard. I'm right here, you know, Lyra called out without looking up. Clora didn't flinch. Good. Then you heard me. Lyra gave a faint, dangerous smile. Clear as ever, Alpha. Eli stepped up beside Darren, datapad tucked under one arm. I'll start prepping the field gear. Enchantments, void stone countermeasures, and a communications array. Darren turned to her. How's the calibration for portal syncing going? Solid, she replied. But I'm not sending anyone into anchor territory without protections. Whatever Cael found out there, it's still humming. Clora looked to the team. Gear up. We leave at first light. Omega padded to her side, alert but silent. The team was taking shape. But the road ahead was steep, and the ghosts in the ash were waiting. Later that evening, Darren wandered through the House of Silver Mirrors. The once crumbling estate now shimmered with quiet authority, reforged stone, modern wards built into old architecture, corridors lined with new defences and repurposed elegance. The staff moved like clockwork, efficient and disciplined. He found Rose on the upper balcony overlooking the courtyard. She didn't turn as he approached. You've done a lot, he said simply. She sipped from a glass of deep red wine, then glanced sideways. More than most notice. I notice, he said. Last time I was here, this place was half smoke and shadows. And now? It's still got shadows, Darren said, stepping beside her. But they're yours now. A small smirk touched her lips. You always did know how to compliment a warlord. He chuckled. Not bad for a former information broker turned city builder. You're not wrong, she murmured. But it's not just mine anymore. Vess, Lyra, Eli. They've all left fingerprints here, even you. Darren leaned forward on the railing. I didn't expect to care what happened to this place. But you do. Yeah, he said. And I see why you came back. They stood in silence for a beat, the moonlight reflecting off the polished stone below. Darren finally asked, You think Cael's right? About the child? Rose's expression cooled. I think Cael doesn't bluff, and I think if that child exists, we're already late. He nodded slowly. Then let's not waste time. She didn't respond right away. Then, almost softly, Be careful out there, Darren. He met her eyes. Always. And Rose? Nice balcony. Very war lady of Concordia. She rolled her eyes and walked away, but not without the faintest smile. The night settled around them. Morning was coming. Chapter 6. First light, first strike. The morning sun crested low over the courtyard of the House of Silver Mirrors, casting amber light through a veil of mist that still clung to the cobblestones. The pack assembled with quiet precision, gear strapped tight, weapons checked, minds focused. Clara stood near the stables, cinching the strap on her saddle. She wore her usual blend of tactical gear and ancient authority, staff of light secured to her back, P90 clipped across her front, a calm determination in her eyes. Omega waited nearby, tail still, eyes alert. Eli adjusted the buckles on her horse's harness, muttering enchantments under her breath to stabilize the stirrups. She was clearly more comfortable with tech than tack. Cael Varnor was already mounted, blending into the early light with his muted travel gear and silent presence. His horse barely made a sound beneath him, trained, patient, and used to long hauls without question. Darren stood nearby, eyeing his steed like it might bite him. This thing's looking at me weird, he muttered. That's because it senses fear, Eli replied dryly. I'm not afraid. I'm cautious. There's a difference. The horse snorted in response. Clara passed by already mounted. If it throws you, try landing on your pride. It's thick enough to cushion the fall. Funny, Darren grumbled. You know I'm more of a wheels and engines kind of guy. You'll manage, Cael said. Just don't hold the reins like you're throttling a grenade. Lyra emerged last, already astride her black mare. She rode like someone born to the saddle, silent, shadow-bound, and dangerously composed. She glanced at Darren and smirked. He gave her a mock salute. Try not to vanish until we're on sight, yeah? Lyra's smirk was dangerous. No promises. Clara turned in the saddle, her voice commanding. This isn't a patrol, it's a strike. We move light, fast, and quiet. Cael leads us to the safe house. Once we arrive, I give the orders. Understood? All heads nodded. She looked to Omega. Let's move. The team rode out of the courtyard, hooves striking rhythm against Concordia's old stone roads. The fog peeled back as they moved, the city waking behind them. And ahead, where black dawn once whispered in shadows, the hunt began. The ride through Concordia's outer rim was long and silent. Mist still hugged the earth as the pack team crossed into the wild fringes, once fortified by the black dawn, now left to rot in tangled brush and broken fences. Clara rode point with Cael beside her, Omega weaving through the undergrowth ahead like a phantom scout. Behind them, Eli kept her mount calm with whispered enchantments, occasionally checking her compass globe. Lyra brought up the rear, bow resting across her saddle, gaze never still. Darren bounced in the saddle, every hoofbeat another insult to his back. This is unnatural, he muttered. You know wheels exist, right? Eli smirked. You're doing great. Only fell off once. I didn't fall. I dismounted quickly to stretch. You screamed. I yelled. There's a difference. Clara didn't look back. Focus up. We're close. Cael reined his horse to a slow walk. Half a click out. Abandoned mill. Black Dawn used it as a supply run post. Locals called it Alfheim Hollow. Lyra's voice came low. I know it. I've killed men there. Of course you have, Darren muttered. The trees thinned as they approached Alfheim Hollow. The old mill squatted in a clearing like a wounded beast. Roof sagged, windows shattered, but the stone foundation remained solid. Smoke wisps still curled from the chimney. Clara raised her fist. The team halted. Fresh smoke, Cael murmured, dismounting silently. Someone's been here recently. They tied off their horses and approached on foot. Omega's hackles rose as he sniffed the air, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Clara peered through a broken window. The mill's interior was a single large chamber with a loft overhead, supported by thick wooden beams. Stone grinding wheels dominated the centre, while grain chutes descended from the upper level. Fresh ash scattered the floor around a makeshift fire pit. 3 bedrolls, she whispered. Whoever was here left in a hurry. Eli checked her scanner. Void stone residue, faint but present. Lyra found boot prints in the mud near the door, multiple sets leading toward the mill's back entrance. They knew we were coming. Darren frowned. Or they heard the horses. Movement upstairs, Cael said sharply, weapon drawn. Above them, floorboards creaked. Once, twice. Clara motioned the team into position. Eli and Darren took the front entrance. Lyra ghosted toward the rear door. Clara and Cael moved to flank the main chamber while Omega circled wide. Clara called out, "Exit the building with hands visible." Silence. Then a crossbow bolt punched through the loft floor where she'd been standing. "Contact rear!" Lyra's voice cracked through the air as the back door exploded outward. 3 figures in Black Dawn masks charged through. Not the stumbling remnants Clara expected, but trained fighters moving with deadly precision. The first attacker vaulted over a grinding wheel, blade aimed at Eli. She twisted aside, her silver-packed dagger flashing with starlight as she caught his wrist and redirected his momentum into the stone wall. Darren brought Thunderstrike up in a smooth arc, the enchanted 12-gauge booming as it sent the second fighter flying backward into the grain chutes. "Stay down!" The third fighter engaged Cael in a deadly dance around the mill's support beams, using the wooden columns for cover as they exchanged rapid strikes. Above, footsteps pounded across the loft. Clara unslung her P90, laying down suppressing fire through the floorboards while raising her staff of light. The crystal head blazed as she sent a pulse of energy upward, the combined assault eliciting pained shouts from whoever lurked above. "Lyra, stairs!" Clara commanded. Lyra was already moving, her fire and ice daggers gleaming as she bounded up the wooden staircase. The fireblade left glowing trails in the air while frost crystals formed along the ice dagger's edge. Steel rang against steel in the cramped space above, punctuated by hisses of steam where her opposing elements met enemy weapons. The fighter engaging Cael broke off suddenly, producing a small crystal vial. He hurled it at the ground between them. Void stone powder erupted in a choking cloud. Cael staggered backward, his movements sluggish as the anti-magic field took hold. The attacker pressed his advantage, blade sweeping toward Cael's throat. Omega's massive form crashed through the rear door, jaws clamping down on the attacker's sword arm. The man screamed as the dire wolf's weight bore him to the ground. "Secure them!" Clara ordered, sweeping the room with her 90 pesos, while her staff's light cut through the void stone haze. Eli bound the unconscious fighters with her technical restraints, while Darren checked them for additional weapons, Thunderstrike ready. Above, the sounds of combat had ceased. Lyra descended the stairs, dragging a 4th attacker behind her, both her daggers still smoking from residual magic. "This one was setting charges," she reported, tossing a half-assembled explosive device to Clara. "Meant to bring the whole loft down on us." Clara examined the device. crude but effective. They were covering something. Cael, recovered from the void stone exposure, pointed to a section of the mill floor where the stones seemed different. There. That's not original construction. Together they pried up the false flagstones, revealing a narrow passage leading underground. The air that rose from below carried the acrid smell of burnt magic and something else, something organic and wrong. One of the captured fighters stirred, blood trickling from his split lip. Clara knelt beside him, P90 at ready. "What's down there?" He laughed, a wet, bitter sound. "The nursery." Chapter 7. The Nursery. The narrow passage descended at a steep angle, carved stone giving way to rough-hewn walls that seemed to absorb their flashlight beams. The air grew colder with each step, carrying an acrid smell that made their eyes water. "Voidstone corruption," Eli murmured, checking her scanner. Heavy concentration ahead. Clara moved point, P90 ready, her staff of light providing additional illumination. Behind her, Darren kept Thunderstrike trained on the shadows ahead, while Cael watched their six. Lyra melted into the darkness like she belonged there, daggers loose in her hands. Omega's hackles were raised, a low growl rumbling continuously in his chest. The passage opened into a circular chamber carved from living rock. What they found wasn't a nursery for children. It was something far worse. Ritual circles had been carved into the floor, each one radiating dark energy that made the air shimmer with unnatural heat. Symbols that hurt to look at directly covered the walls, and in the center of the room stood a twisted altar made from what looked like fused bone and metal. "Jesus," Darren breathed. "They weren't keeping kids here." "No," Clara said grimly. "They were breeding something else." The temperature plummeted suddenly, their breath coming out in visible puffs. The ritual circles began to glow with sickly purple light. "Movement!" Cael shouted, raising his weapon. Shadows began pouring from the carved symbols on the walls. Not natural darkness, but something alive and hungry. The shadows coalesced in the center of the chamber, forming a writhing mass of tendrils and void black substance that seemed to absorb the light from their equipment. "Void Wraith," Eli said, backing toward the passage. "It's feeding on our enchantments." The creature let out a sound like reality tearing, a shriek that bypassed the ears and went straight to the spine. Tendrils of pure darkness lashed out toward them. Clara opened fire with her P90, the enchanted rounds sparking with silver fire as they struck the wraith's form. The creature recoiled but didn't dissipate. Instead, it seemed to grow larger, feeding on the magical energy. "Conventional rounds aren't enough," she called out. Darren leveled Thunderstrike and pulled the trigger. The enchanted 12-gauge boomed, its shell erupting in a burst of consecrated salt and iron fragments. The wraith's shriek intensified as part of its form wavered, but the gaps quickly filled in. Lyra darted forward, her fire dagger trailing flames as she slashed at a reaching tendril. Where the blade connected, steam hissed and the darkness recoiled, but ice crystals from her other dagger seemed to slow the creature's movements. "We need the starlight blades," Clara shouted, drawing her silver dagger. The starlight gem embedded in the pommel blazed with pure white light that made the wraith writhe in apparent pain. Eli reached for her own dagger, then paused. She looked at the massive creature filling half the chamber, calculating distances and angles. "Keebler, now would be good," Darren yelled as another tendril nearly took his head off. Instead of drawing her dagger, Eli reached into her satchel and pulled out something that made Darren's eyes go wide. A massive .44 Desert Eagle, its barrel etched with so many enchantment runes it practically glowed in the dark. "Where the hell were you hiding that cannon?" Darren demanded, diving away from another attack. "You never asked," Eli replied calmly, taking aim. The Desert Eagle roared, a sound that somehow managed to be louder than Thunderstrike in the confined space. The enchanted round struck the wraith's core and erupted in a burst of starlight that sent shockwaves through the creature's form. Half the wraith's mass dispersed instantly. "Holy shit, Keebler!" Darren laughed, pumping another round into Thunderstrike. What else you got in that bag? A rocket launcher? Just the one-hand cannon, Eli replied, already lining up her next shot. Working together, they found their rhythm. Clara and Eli coordinated their starlight daggers, slashing at the wraith's tendrils to fragment its essence, while their enhanced firearms kept it contained. Lyra's elemental daggers created openings, the fire disrupting its form while the ice slowed its regeneration. The wraith's shrieks grew more desperate as its mass continued to diminish. Finally, with a sound like breaking glass, it collapsed in on itself, the darkness being drawn into the twin starlight gems like water down a drain. Silence fell in the chamber, broken only by their heavy breathing. "Well," Darren said, reloading Thunderstrike, "that was educational. Eli, we need to have a serious talk about your gear loadout." "The 40 falls for emergencies," she said, holstering the massive pistol. "What do you call this?" "Tuesday." Clara moved to examine the altar while Omega sniffed cautiously at the now inactive ritual circles. This whole site was a trap. They knew we'd follow the trail here. "And they left us a guardian to make sure we didn't leave," Cael added grimly. Lyra sheathed her daggers, both weapons still smoking from residual magical energy. "Question is, how long ago did they clear out?" Eli checked her scanner again. "Void stone residues suggest they've been gone at least 48 hours. Maybe more." Clara's jaw tightened. "Then we're already behind." She looked around the corrupted chamber one more time, then headed for the passage. "Let's move." "We've got ground to make up." As they climbed back toward daylight, Darren fell into step beside Eli. "So, about that hand cannon. Don't even think about asking to borrow it." "I wasn't going to ask to borrow it. I was going to ask if you'd make me one." Behind them, the chamber lay empty and silent. Another Black Dawn site cleared, another lead gone cold. But now they knew their enemies were still thinking 3 moves ahead. Chapter 8, Cold Trails. The second site wasn't a safe house at all. It was a cave system hidden in the rocky hillside, concealed by fallen boulders and overgrown brush. Natural camouflage that would be invisible from aerial surveillance. Clara led the team inside, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The cave had been converted into a temporary shelter, sleeping bags, portable equipment, and signs of extended habitation. "They were here for weeks," Cael observed, examining the makeshift camp. But it was the smaller details that told the real story. A portable crib fashioned from tactical gear and soft blankets. Baby bottles cleaned and stacked near a portable water purifier. Disposable diapers in a carefully managed waste area. "The child's an infant," Eli said, scanning the residual energy signatures. "Under a year old. The magical resonance is extraordinary for someone so young." Darren found evidence of careful planning, baby formula, medical supplies, even toys appropriate for an infant. Someone's been taking good care of the kid. This isn't a kidnapping situation. "No," Clara said grimly. "Syrians protecting the child. Question is, from what?" Lyra discovered something more troubling in a side passage. Defensive positions carved into the rock, with clear fields of fire toward the cave entrance. They were expecting trouble. Set up to fight off pursuit. In the deepest part of the cave system, Eli found the portal chamber. Like the previous site, it showed evidence of hasty but organized departure. "Same story," she reported after scanning the array. "Portal to Alfheim, used approximately 10 days ago. But this time," she frowned at her readings, "there are traces of a third magical signature. Someone else went through with them." "Accomplice?" Cael asked. "Or extraction," Clara said. "Someone came to get them." As they prepared to leave, Omega discovered one final clue, a small blanket left behind, still carrying the scent of an infant. But there was something else mixed in, something that made the dire wolf's hackles rise. "What is it, boy?" Clara asked. Eli held her scanner near the blanket. "Hybrid magical signature. Human and something else. The child isn't entirely human." The implications hung heavy in the cave's silence. They weren't just hunting a man and a stolen baby, they were dealing with something far more complex. And now that mystery had been taken directly into the heart of Guardian territory. The ride back to the House of Silver Mirrors was conducted in heavy silence, each team member processing what they'd discovered. The sun was setting by the time they reached the estate's gates, casting long shadows across the courtyard. Rose was waiting for them in the main hall, flanked by Lyra and Lady Vess. Her expression sharpened as she read their faces. "Bad news, I take it," she said without preamble. "Worse than bad," Clara replied, dismounting and handing her reins to a stable hand. "Syrian's gone to Alfheim, 10 days ago, but he left the child behind." That brought silence to the hall. Rose's eyes narrowed. "Split up? That's not like her." "The child is Ultranatius's son," Eli said quietly, "born from his essence after Gunnar killed him. The magical signatures don't lie." The weight of that revelation settled over the room like a shroud. A demon prince, somewhere in the realms, while his mother had fled to another realm entirely. "So where's the kid now?" Rose asked. "That," Clara said grimly, "is what we need to find out. And we need to figure out why Syrian went to Alfheim without him." Jiro appeared as if summoned, taking their travel packs with quiet efficiency. Rose gestured toward the meeting room. Inside, all of it. The obsidian table activated as they gathered around it, casting pale light across grim faces. Clara laid out their findings methodically: the cave system, the evidence of long-term care, the portal destination. "The child is Ultranatius's son," Eli said quietly, "born from his essence after Gunnar killed him. The magical signatures don't lie." Rose's fingers drummed against the table surface. "A demon prince, hidden somewhere in the realms, while his protector flees to another realm. The question is, why?" Lyra spoke from her position by the wall. "Maybe Syrian's getting back up? Or extraction?" Cael, who had remained silent through the briefing, finally spoke. "The question isn't what the child is. It's why Syrian left it and went to Alfheim specifically." Darren leaned back in his chair. "Inside help. Has to be. Nobody just walks into Guardian territory without someone rolling out the red carpet." "Which means we need to follow the trail," Clara said, looking around the table at her team. "The child's still out there and Syrian knows where. We find him. We find answers." Rose stood, moving to the window that overlooked her domain. "This changes everything. If there's corruption in Alfheim, and they have access to whatever this child represents." "It's bigger than Earth," Eli finished. "Bigger than Black Dawn. This is realm-level politics now." The weight of that statement settled over the room like a shroud. Clara stood, her decision made. The weight of command settled on her shoulders as she looked at Darren and Eli. "Well," she said simply, "I guess we're off to Alfheim." Chapter 9. Robes and Rituals. The fire in Aeliana's hearth burned low, casting the room in a soft amber glow. Shadows swayed lazily against rune-etched stone, the faint shimmer of Alfheim's twin moons filtering through the tall crystal windows. The table still carried the remnants of dinner: bread torn in half, an empty bottle of elven wine, herbs scattered across a wooden board. Gunnar leaned back in his chair, arms folded loosely across his chest. For once, no armor weighed him down, no weapons, no tactical harness. Just a robe, deep green trimmed with silver thread, that Aeliana had insisted he wear while his shirt dried by the fire. It fit well enough, but to him it felt like silk chains. "Stop fidgeting," Aeliana said, a faint smile playing at her lips. She sat across from him, her platinum hair catching the light like starlight caught in water. "You wear it well." "I look ridiculous," Gunnar muttered. "You look comfortable," she corrected, "which is far rarer." He gave a low grunt, shifting in his seat. "I don't fight in dresses." "Robes," she corrected again, more firmly, "and not everything is a battlefield." Gunnar exhaled through his nose, gaze drifting to the fire. For a long moment, silence stretched, peaceful, unfamiliar. Then Aeliana's voice softened. "You've been thinking about it." He didn't need to ask what. "Yeah." She leaned forward, resting her elbows lightly on the table. "On Earth, what are the rituals?" "For a union?" He scratched at his beard, uncomfortable with the robe, the wine, and the way her question cut deeper than any blade. "Depends where you are. Sometimes it's standing in front of a man with a book. Sometimes it's signing a paper. Sometimes—" He paused, remembering faint glimpses of a life that might have been. "Sometimes it's just two people deciding. No matter what comes, they'll keep standing together." Aeliana nodded, eyes thoughtful. In Alfheim, it is not so different. The ceremony is a binding of light, two strands of starlight woven together and sealed by the mother's blessing. The witnesses are few, the vows eternal. Her gaze lingered on him, searching. "Would you want it here? Or on Earth?" Gunnar shifted in his robe, the silver trim catching the firelight. "Here's peaceful. Feels right. But Earth's home. At least, the one I keep fighting for." He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding her eyes. "Truth is, doesn't matter where, long as it's you standing there." Aeliana's lips curved, soft, not triumphant, not teasing, just full. "And yet it matters more than you admit. To your pack, to mine, to both realms." Gunnar's jaw flexed. "So we make it simple. No councillors, no generals, no wars waiting at the door. Just us." "And the wolves," she said gently. "Always," he agreed. The moment stretched, fragile and real. Aeliana reached across the table, her fingers brushing against his cybernetic hand. He let her, the cold steel warming beneath her touch. Then, the wards at the front of the house shimmered. A knock echoed against the crystal doorframe. Both of them froze. Aeliana's brows lifted, amused. "You invited them?" Gunnar scowled. "No." The door opened with a faint hum of wards parting. Clara stepped in first, armoured and composed, Omega padding silently at her side. Eli followed, violet eyes scanning every rune in the room. And then Darren, half-smirk already in place, came through last. He froze. The smirk widened. "Well," Darren drawled, leaning one shoulder against the doorframe. "Look who finally discovered his feminine side." Gunnar's one good eye narrowed dangerously. "It's a robe," he growled. Darren tilted his head, grinning. "Looks like a dress." Clara crossed her arms deadpan. "Better than the whiskey-stained sweatshirts you used to wear." Eli didn't even try to hide her amusement. She stepped closer, studying the fabric like it was a specimen. Hand-stitched moon weave. Rare. Honestly, Gunnar, it suits you. I could add some rune work along the hem for resilience. Omega gave a low chuff that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Gunnar exhaled through his nose, the sound somewhere between a sigh and a growl. "One of these days, Darren." "What?" Darren cut in, grinning like a wolf who'd stolen the kill. "You gonna hit me in your housecoat?" "Come on, boss, I'll never live this down." Aeliana, entirely unbothered, rose gracefully from her chair. "He wears it well," she said simply, voice like cool water poured over fire. "Better than you ever could, Darren." Clara smirked faintly. Eli coughed to hide her laugh. Darren clutched his chest, mock-wounded. "Et tu, elf queen," he muttered. Gunnar stood slowly, the robe swaying around his legs, his cybernetic arm gleaming in the firelight. He crossed the room with deliberate steps, stopping just inches from Darren. "You breathe a word of this outside this room," he said low. "And I'll make sure your shotgun jams for the rest of your life." Darren raised his brows, unrepentant. "Worth it." Clara finally broke in, her voice cutting clean through the banter. "We didn't come to critique fashion." Her gaze flicked to Gunnar, then Aeliana. "We have intelligence. Cael Varnor. Concordia." It's time you heard it. The humour ebbed, replaced by the weight of war pressing back into the room. Aeliana inclined her head, serene but watchful. "Then speak." Gunnar didn't move. didn't answer. He only tugged the robe's sash tighter around his waist, squared his shoulders and gestured towards the table. Sit. Tell me everything. The fire crackled. The pack gathered, and the night of laughter gave way to the storm waiting just beyond Alfheim's walls. Chapter 10. Briefing. The last of the laughter about Gunner's robe had faded, leaving only the crackle of the hearth. The table was cleared of dinner plates, replaced by Clara's datapad, and the shimmer of Eli's bracer projecting pale blue glyphs into the air. Darren leaned against the wall, arms crossed, the smirk finally gone. Clara began, her tone clipped and precise. We tracked down 2 of the old Black Dawn safehouses, both active, both wrong. She nodded to Eli, who flicked her wrist and shifted the projection to show the first site. A weathered stone mill, rafters sagging, chimney smoke curling faintly. The mill looked dead from the outside, Clara said, but inside, fresh bedrolls, void stone residue, and enough supplies to arm a squad. They'd been using it as a staging ground. We hit resistance, put them down. Her jaw tightened. What mattered was beneath the floor. The projection sank lower, revealing the false chamber beneath the mill, circles carved into stone, jagged runes etched into the walls, a crude altar of bone and blackened iron. It wasn't storage. It was a ritual site, void stone traces everywhere. And when we breached it, she glanced at Eli. A wraith, Eli confirmed, her voice cool, bound in the circle. When the wards snapped, it came for us. Didn't last long, Darren muttered. Ugly son of a bitch, though. Ashes now. Clara moved on without comment. Eli shifted the projection again, this time to a black cave system, walls glimmering with faint warding scars. The cave, hidden in the ridge, covered with brush and boulders. Inside, Clara's voice grew sharper. It wasn't a cache. It was lived in. A crib, bottles, toys, medical supplies. A child had been there. Aeliana's lips parted, her calm mask shifting just slightly. Eli added, the resonance was undeniable. Strong, too strong for an infant. It rattled every ward in the place. Clara's gaze hardened. And at the back? A portal chamber. It had been used recently. Too recently. Whoever ran that site pulled out fast, clean, deliberate. They wiped the record of whatever passed through. She let that hang a moment. We know this much. Something, or someone, went through that portal, to Alfheim. The room went still. Gunner's good eye fixed on her. You're saying they sent it here? Clara didn't blink. That's the speculation. And if I had to bet, it was Syrian. But the truth is that we don't know. No signature, no trail, no clue why she came or what she wanted here. Silence pressed in, broken only by the fire popping in the hearth. Darren shook his head slowly. So, she kicks in our door, rattles the walls, and ghosts again. And we're left with what? A dead wraith, an empty crib, and no damn answers. Eli dimmed the projection, her face troubled. Exactly. Clara folded her arms. We've got the where, the how, even hints of the what. But the why? She shook her head. Still a blank. Aeliana's eyes swept the table, voice low but steady. Then that is what must be found, no one argued. And in the hush of her home, the unanswered question weighed heavier than the fire's warmth. The fire had sunk low, throwing the room into ember-red shadows. The pack's words lingered heavy in the air. Clara ended the report with a clipped shake of her head. We don't know why she came. Syrian left us nothing. Silence. Then Aeliana spoke. Her voice was calm, but the steel beneath it cut like a blade. No, she left us more than you think. The others turned to her. In Atherin, when Gunnar stood against her, Syrian was not alone. She had a wolf at her side, vast, black as the void, its eyes burning with the essence of the Demon King. I fought them both. That is how I saved him. Gunnar's fist tightened against the table, the memory clear as blood. Clara frowned. There's been no intelligence linking her to that wolf since. No sign of it anywhere else. Aeliana's gaze sharpened, her tone carrying the weight of certainty. There were reports. Whispers in the north country of a dark wolf roaming the forests near Frostmere. Guardians dismissed them as fear tales, but I remember, and I realise now. She paused, the firelight glinting off her eyes. Those reports ended the week we fought in Atherin. Ended the moment Syrian had the wolf at her side. The silence that followed was suffocating. Clara's expression hardened. So she didn't come here for nothing. She came for it, Darren muttered, voice grim. And she walked away with a nightmare on a leash. Aeliana's hand tightened on the edge of the table. Yes, she stole it from Alfheim, and that is why she came. Gunnar leaned forward, his voice low, final. Then we hunt her, and we take it back. The fire cracked once, sparks scattering into the air, and every soul in the room understood. Syrian's passage through Alfheim had not been meaningless. It had been theft, one that could unmake realms if left unanswered. The table had gone quiet after Aeliana's realization. Clara began gathering her datapad. Eli shut down her bracer, and even Omega stretched out near the hearth, tail flicking lazily. The pack had done what they could for the night, but Gunnar's eye tracked Darren as he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, gaze somewhere distant. The grin was gone, replaced by the set jaw of a man carrying too many ghosts. Gunnar stood. The robe swayed around his legs, but no one dared laugh this time. Darren, walk with me. Darren raised an eyebrow. You gonna strangle me with your belt sash out there, boss? Just get up. The two of them stepped out into the night air, leaving the warmth of the hearth behind. Alfheim's moons painted silver light across the trees, the leaves whispering in a language older than either of them. They stood in silence for a moment, the cold air cutting the weight of the evening. Finally, Gunnar turned to him. We've bled together a long damn time, Gunnar said. Iraq, Korea, Kuwait. Places I don't even want to remember. You've had my back when no one else did. And now, he exhaled, slow. Now I've got something to ask. Darren smirked faintly, but his eyes were sharp. You're not the asking type, Gunnar. Not usually. Gunnar met his gaze, steady. But this matters. I'm marrying Aeliana, and I want you standing beside me when I do. My best man. For once, Darren didn't have a joke ready. His smirk faltered, replaced by something raw, something older. He looked away, jaw tight, then back at his friend. After all the crap we've walked through, you're really trusting me not to screw up your wedding? Gunnar's mouth twitched, just short of a smile. If you survived me in uniform, you can survive this. The silence stretched again. Then Darren reached out, clasping Gunnar's forearm the way soldiers do when words fall short. Hell yes, he said, voice rough. Wouldn't let anyone else do it. Gunnar gave a short nod, the bond unspoken but solid as steel. They stood there a while longer, just two old war dogs under Alfheim's moons, the weight of their battles behind them and the weight of the future waiting. The two men stood in silence, clasped forearms holding firm, the kind of grip only forged through years of sand, blood, and fire. Darren finally released him, shaking his head with a crooked grin. Best man, huh? Guess you really are going soft on me. Not soft, Gunnar said, dead serious. Just finally doing something worth the fight. Darren nodded at that. No argument. No joke. Just respect. Gunnar turned back toward the house but paused, glancing over his shoulder. Oh, one more thing. Darren frowned. What now? I'll make the appointment for you. Darren blinked. Appointment? Gunnar's mouth twitched into the faintest smirk. Yeah, for your man dress. I'm wearing elven robes. No reason you shouldn't suffer too. Darren stared at him, jaw dropping. Then he barked out a laugh that echoed through the silver-lit trees. You're out of your damn mind. Probably, Gunnar said, already walking. But you said yes. Darren shook his head, still chuckling as he fell into step behind him. Elven robes. Can't wait to see how you explain that to the 5077th. The two of them disappeared back into the warm glow of the house, laughter trailing in their wake. And for that one night, the weight of war eased, just enough for two brothers to remember they were still alive. The door swung open, and the cold breath of Alfheim's night followed Gunnar and Darren back into the hearth-lit room. Clara looked up from where she'd settled Omega near the fire. Eli had already folded herself into a chair with a tablet, but even she glanced up, curiosity flickering. Darren still chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. Gunnar just brushed past him, deadpan as ever, though the faint smirk tugging at his beard betrayed him. Aeliana stood from her place at the table, her expression softening. "It is late," she said. "The road waits for no one, but tonight does not need to be another battle. Stay here. Rest. Tomorrow we will decide the next step together." Clara straightened, already half in soldier's mode. "We shouldn't impose." "You are not imposing," Aeliana countered gently. Her blue eyes swept the room, calm but firm. "You are pack, and my hearth is open." Omega gave a low chuff, as if agreeing. Eli stretched her arms, the glow of her bracer fading as she shut it down. "Beds beat cots any day, I'm not arguing." Darren threw himself into a chair with his usual grin. "Hell, if the Elf Queen's offering hospitality, I'm not about to say no. Got any more of that wine?" Clara exhaled through her nose, but she didn't fight it. She simply nodded once. "One night, then." Gunnar glanced at Aeliana. Their eyes met, a quiet understanding passing between them. For all the fire and shadows pressing in from outside, there was strength in this. His pack gathered, their bonds holding. "Fine," he said. "One night." The fire cracked, sparks drifting upward as the pack settled in. The weight of unanswered questions still lingered, but for the first time in too long, they were under the same roof, together. Tomorrow the hunt would begin. Tonight they had peace. Chapter 11. Morning Light. Morning came soft in Alfheim. The light wasn't harsh or sharp like Earth's. It drifted through the crystal windows in silvery ribbons, painting the walls of Aeliana's home in pale hues of gold and blue. The air carried the scent of dew and cedar, the kind of stillness that made even soldiers forget what tension felt like. The pack gathered slowly around the long oak table. Clara was the first to rise, as always, her hair still damp from washing. Eli followed, half awake and nursing a cup of something that steamed faintly violet. Darren came last, boots untied, muttering under his breath about elves and their early mornings. Gunnar was already there. He wasn't armoured, wasn't armed, just sitting in a plain grey shirt, sleeves rolled, a steaming cup of tea cupped in his hands. His shoulders weren't drawn tight for once, his eye wasn't sweeping exits or scanning shadows, he was still. The Omega noticed first. He lay near his boots, tail flicking lazily, content in the kind of peace the pack never got to keep for long. Even Clara paused mid-sentence, realising she hadn't seen their commander this relaxed in years. Aeliana moved quietly between them, setting out plates of fruit and warm bread, her movements graceful and unhurried. When she passed Gunnar, her hand brushed his shoulder in wordless affection. He looked up at her with a faint smile, the real kind, not the battlefield smirk his team was used to. Darren blinked at the sight, then leaned toward Clara. "You seeing this?" he muttered. "He's been sitting still for 5 minutes? I've seen him do less in firefights." Clara smirked. "Don't ruin it." "You'll scare him back into command mode." Eli looked over her cup, eyes glinting with quiet amusement. "It's weirdly peaceful. Like he's not waiting for the next explosion." Gunnar's voice came from the head of the table, low but carrying that familiar edge. "Keep talking and I'll start handing out assignments before breakfast." Darren grinned, unrepentant. "There he is." Aeliana's voice cut through the banter, soft and sure. "He won't." The room went still again, not from command but from calm. Her tone wasn't defiance, it was truth. Even Gunnar didn't argue. He only sipped his tea, the faintest trace of humour in his good eye. Darren shook his head, leaning back with a grin. Guess the wolf finally found somewhere to rest. Gunnar didn't answer right away. He just looked toward the open window where sunlight spilled across the floor and the faint song of distant birds carried through the valley. Maybe, he said finally, for now. Aeliana gave him a small, knowing smile and set a hand lightly on the table beside his. For now is enough. The others exchanged quiet glances but said nothing. They could feel it, the shift in him. Not a loss of edge, but a return of balance. The realm had taken the soldier and reminded him he was still a man. Breakfast continued in easy silence, laughter threading through the edges of the morning. Outside, Alfheim glowed beneath the twin suns, its forests whispering with promise. Soon enough, they would plan. Soon enough, they would hunt. But for this one rare morning, the pack allowed themselves to breathe. The morning had settled into an easy rhythm. Darren and Gunnar sat near the open window, trading quiet jokes and half-serious plans for the journey ahead. Omega had dozed off at the hearth, his great chest rising and falling with the lazy contentment of a creature finally at peace. Clara was finishing her tea when Aeliana's voice cut gently through the room. "Clara," she said, from where she stood by the door, "walk with me, if you would." Clara looked up a touch wary. Aeliana's tone wasn't commanding, it never was, but it carried the quiet weight of a request that mattered. "Sure," Clara said, setting down her cup. She followed Aeliana through the open doorway and into the gardens beyond. The air outside was alive. Sunlight slipped through the crystal trees in fractured colours, glinting off petals that shimmered like spun glass. The garden hummed faintly with the magic of Alfheim itself, peaceful, watchful, eternal. For a while they walked in silence. Aeliana's robes whispered across the path, her steps unhurried, her posture easy. Clara's boots made soft indentations in the moss-lined stones. It wasn't until they reached the arch of Silvervine near the back of the garden that Aeliana spoke. "Do you remember," she began softly, "your first day at the War College?" Clara snorted under her breath. "Hard to forget." Aeliana smiled faintly, eyes warm with the memory. "You were certain you did not belong. I recall your words clearly. I fight, I don't recite." Clara smirked. "Still true, mostly." "Perhaps," Aeliana said. "But you learned both. You learned balance, and in time, you taught it to others." They stopped beneath a canopy of luminous blossoms, the light spilling between them in silver motes. "You were my student," Aeliana said, her tone gentle but deliberate. "But now you are more than that. You have grown into command, into balance. I see in you the strength of both worlds." Clara stopped, studying her mentor carefully. "All right," she said slowly. "You didn't bring me out here to talk about the past." "What's going on?" Aeliana's expression softened, a light like dawn crossing her features. "There is something I must ask of you. Something personal." Clara's stance shifted, curious. "In Alfheim," Aeliana began, "when two souls bind their light, one stands beside the bride. We call her Lirenthal, the keeper of the thread. She steadies the vow and weaves the light that joins two spirits as one." Clara frowned, uncertain. "You're talking about a wedding?" Aeliana nodded once, a quiet smile blooming. "Gunnar asked me to marry him." For a moment, Clara just stared. Then she blinked, shaking her head. "You're serious?" "I am," Aeliana said softly. "He asked, and I said yes." Clara let out a low whistle, trying and failing to hide her grin. "Well, damn. Didn't think he had that kind of courage left in him." Aeliana's laugh was warm and musical. "He surprises even me." Clara crossed her arms, still half in disbelief. "And you're asking me to... what exactly?" Aeliana stepped closer, her eyes glowing faintly in the dappled light. "I would ask you to stand beside me, to serve as my Lirenthal and, as your world calls it, my bridesmaid. One role, two meanings, the first of its kind." Clara's grin softened into something truer. "You're serious about this? Mixing both traditions?" "Yes," Aeliana said simply, "because this union isn't only ours. It's a bridge. Between realms, between ways of life, between all that divides us. And I can think of no one better suited to help me hold that bridge than you." Clara looked down for a moment, then back up, her voice quieter. "You gave me my start, Aeliana. You believed in me before I did. It'd be an honor." Aeliana's expression brightened, relief and affection mingling in her eyes. "Then it is settled." They clasped hands, firm, respectful, equal. The garden seemed to breathe with them. Silver motes rose and swirled around their joined hands, light shimmering faintly where skin met skin. "You've made me proud, Clara," Aeliana said softly. "You always have." Clara smiled. "Just don't make me wear anything I can't fight in." Aeliana laughed, the sound ringing through the vines like chimes in wind. "We'll see." The two stood together beneath the arch, teacher and student, warrior and guardian, as Alfheim's light danced around them, quiet witnesses to a promise that would soon bind two worlds. As the garden door closed behind Aeliana and Clara, the house fell still again. Darren leaned back in his chair, boots on the table, that smug grin hovering. Eli sat across from him, quietly adjusting a set of runic calibrations on her bracer. Gunnar stood by the hearth, one hand resting on the mantel, gaze lost in the flames. Darren broke the silence first. "You gonna tell her?" Gunnar shot him a look. "Right," Darren said, grin widening. "You're just gonna stand here and look heroic." "Exactly." Eli looked up at that, amused. "What's going on?" Darren's eyes danced, but for once he kept his mouth shut. He looked at Gunnar like a man handing off a live grenade. Gunnar sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Fine." He turned toward Eli. "Aeliana said yes." Eli blinked. "To what?" He met her eyes. "To me." The words landed like a soft thunderclap. Eli's lips parted, a slow smile spreading as realization hit. You asked her?" Gunnar nodded once. "Yes. Figured if I can survive demons, I can survive marriage." Darren barked out a laugh. Eli set her bracer aside and stood, her tone warming. "Gunnar, that's—" She stopped herself, searching for the right word. "That's right. About damn time, too." He gave a short, gruff laugh. "Yeah, I keep hearing that." Darren raised his mug in mock salute. "To the happy couple." May the wedding not end in a tactical withdrawal. Eli rolled her eyes. "Ignore him." "Does Clara know yet?" "Not yet," Gunnar said. "Aeliana's telling her now." Figured it'd mean more coming from her. Eli smiled, genuinely this time. "You're learning." He shrugged. "Trying." The three of them fell quiet again, the crackle of the hearth filling the space. For once, Gunnar didn't look like a commander or a soldier, just a man, still a little stunned that, after everything, he'd found peace worth fighting for. By late morning, the light had shifted, less gold, more silver. The soft haze of peace that had settled over Aeliana's home was beginning to thin. Clara and Aeliana re-entered the house together. The air still smelled of bread and tea, the last traces of breakfast cooling on the table. Darren was leaning back in his chair, half dozing, while Eli worked quietly on her bracer beside the fire. Gunnar stood by the window, the sunlight cutting across his face. Aeliana's eyes swept the room. "I trust you kept out of trouble." Darren stretched and smirked. "Define trouble." Clara shot him a look that needed no translation. "Don't." Eli glanced up with a faint smile. "I assume everything went well?" Aeliana's gaze softened toward Clara, who gave a small nod. "Yeah," Clara said. "We're good." Darren's brow rose, but for once he didn't push. He only gave Clara a knowing grin. "You two have that secret mission accomplished look. Should I be worried?" "Always," Clara muttered. Aeliana crossed to Gunnar's side, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. "We've much to discuss," she said quietly, "but perhaps it can wait until evening." You all look as though sleep was a stranger last night. Sleep's overrated, Darren said, so's silence. What's next? Before anyone could answer, the wards on the outer gate thrummed. The sound was low but resonant, like a chime struck deep within the stone. Every head in the room lifted. Omega rose from his spot by the hearth, hackles bristling slightly before settling again, sensing recognition rather than threat. Aeliana turned toward the door, eyes narrowing as the ward's sigils flared with white light. That frequency, she murmured. It's council-bound. Clara reached instinctively for her sidearm before remembering where they were. You expecting company? Aeliana's expression hardened, every trace of the calm mentor replaced by the guardian of Alfheim. No. But one does not ignore a summons from the High Council. The light at the threshold brightened, then steadied. Through the shimmer of the ward came the tall, regal form of Malorian, his silver and gold robes catching the morning sun. His face was carved in that same unreadable calm that always preceded bad news. Lady Vale, he greeted, his voice carrying the quiet weight of authority. Alpha. Gunnar straightened instinctively, all trace of the relaxed morning gone. Councillor. Malorian's gaze swept the room, lingering on the assembled team. The human soldiers, the wolves, the mix of steel and starlight sharing one hearth. He inclined his head slightly. It seems I have arrived at an interesting time. Aeliana met his eyes. You rarely arrive otherwise. Indeed, he said. We must speak. The council has felt a disturbance along the ley lines, one that began the moment Syrian's trail crossed into Alfheim. The balance is shifting. The room fell utterly silent. Outside, the wind moved through the silver trees, and the light around the house dimmed, as though the realm itself were listening. Gunnar exchanged a glance with Aeliana, the quiet between them saying everything. The peace of the morning was over. Chapter 12. The Summons of Noon. The wards flared in pale gold as Malorian stepped through, light rippling across the walls of Aeliana's home like the reflection of a rising sun. His presence filled the room without effort, calm, composed, and bearing that quiet authority that always seemed to silence air itself. Lady Vale, he greeted, inclining his head. Alpha. Gunnar returned the nod, every trace of his easy morning gone. The pack gathered loosely near the hearth straightened instinctively. Even Omega, resting near Clara's boots, raised his head with a low, respectful rumble. Councillor Malorian, Aeliana said, stepping forward. Her tone was measured, though a flicker of warmth softened her eyes. You honour my home. I would never call it an intrusion, he replied, merely overdue. His gaze swept the room, the scattered breakfast plates, the relaxed soldiers, the faint glow of human and wolf spirits sharing one space in harmony. His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, but something near pride. I had hoped to speak with you privately, he began. Council matters are often sensitive. Aeliana folded her hands before her, serene but unyielding. If this concerns me, it concerns them. These are not mere companions, Malorian. They are my kin, my family. He studied her for a heartbeat, then inclined his head in acceptance. As I suspected. You were never one to walk a path alone. The faintest trace of a smirk tugged at Darren's mouth. Clara elbowed him once, subtle but sharp. He stayed quiet. Malorian turned back to Aeliana, his expression regaining its formal calm. The council has concluded its deliberations regarding your conduct in Atherin, your defiance of protocol, and the nature of your bond with the Alpha. There was much debate. Some called for censure, others saw something greater. Gunnar's jaw tensed, but Aeliana laid a hand lightly on his arm, a wordless request for silence. Malorian continued, voice steady. The verdict will be delivered tomorrow at midday, before the full assembly. You are expected to attend in person. Aeliana inclined her head. I will be there. Good, Malorian said. And know this. Whatever decision they pronounce, it will not erase what you have done for Alfheim. Many of us remember who you are, Aeliana, and what you have given. A quiet beat passed, one soldier to another, one guardian to the next. Beneath the formality there was unmistakable respect. Then his tone softened, a faint thread of mentorship breaking through the diplomat's restraint. The Council sees more than your transgression. They see what you have become, a bridge between worlds. Whatever form your service takes after tomorrow, you will not walk it as punishment, but as purpose. Aeliana's gaze met his, steady and clear. Then the balance shifts again. Melorion's lips curved faintly. It always does. And you, more than any, have learned how to move with it. He turned then, his eyes settling briefly on each member of the pack in turn. Clora straightened instinctively under his gaze. Eli offered a polite nod. Darren gave something that could almost pass as respect. Even Omega lowered his head, tail flicking once in acknowledgement. Melorion inclined his own head in return. You've all walked beside her in times that would have broken lesser hearts. The Council may never understand what that means, but I do. Then to Gunnar. Alpha, your presence has changed more than you realise. The threads of Earth and Alfheim no longer pull apart. You should be proud. Gunnar's response was simple but sincere. I am. Satisfied, Melorion stepped back toward the open doorway. The wards shimmered in anticipation, soft light swirling like breath drawn in. He paused once more, looking to Aeliana. Midday tomorrow, he said quietly. And remember, whatever the outcome, the Council does not define who you are. It only acknowledges what the balance already knows. With that, he passed through the threshold, vanishing into the golden light beyond. The wards settled, the glow dimmed, silence returned. For a moment, no one moved. Then Darren exhaled. Well, he muttered, guess that answers the question about a quiet morning. Clora folded her arms. Midday tomorrow, that's not much time. Eli looked toward Aeliana, her expression unreadable. You already know what they'll say, don't you? Aeliana's gaze drifted toward the window, where the silver trees swayed in the distance. I have my suspicions, she said softly, but suspicion and truth rarely walk hand in hand. Gunnar reached for her hand, squeezing once. Whatever happens, we stand with you. Her smile was small, but it carried the weight of belief. I know. Outside, the winds of Alfheim shifted again, carrying the faint chime of far-off bells, the realm's quiet reminder that balance, once stirred, never sleeps. The door closed behind Melorion, and silence followed. For a moment, only the faint crackle of the hearth filled the room. Outside, Alfheim's breeze whispered through the silver trees, scattering light across the floor like falling stars. Clora was the first to speak. Midday tomorrow, she said quietly. That's not much time to get ready. Aeliana drew a slow breath, her composure returning piece by piece. It won't take long. The Council has already decided. Tomorrow is formality. Formality or not, Darren said, leaning back in his chair. We're coming with you. Aeliana turned toward him, her tone gentle but firm. No, you have work to do. The missing child. These are not things that wait for ceremony. Clora stepped forward, arms crossing. With respect, Guardian, you're wrong. There's nothing more important right now than standing with you. I appreciate the sentiment, Aeliana said, but you all have your own missions. The balance doesn't bend for sentiment. That's not sentiment, Clora said. It's loyalty. Big difference. Eli glanced up from her seat, tone calm but certain. If it were any of us, you'd be there without question. You've done more for this team than you realise. You gave us Alfheim's trust, and a home we never thought we'd earn. Aeliana met her gaze, softened by the weight of truth. Gunnar moved to her side then, his voice low but unyielding. They're right. We go as a unit. You're part of that unit, Aeliana. You don't stand alone in this. She hesitated. This isn't your battle. He shook his head. Everything you've done, everything you've risked, was for us, for the pack, for me. So yeah, it is our battle. Darren grinned, arms folded across his chest. Besides, what's the point of you getting fancy council titles if we can't be there to make you look good? That earned a faint smile from her, the tension easing just slightly. You'll distract the council with your sarcasm. Good, he said. Maybe they'll like me better that way. Aeliana looked around the room, her eyes moving from one face to the next. Clara's steady confidence, Eli's quiet conviction, Darren's irreverent grin, Gunner's unwavering presence. The room felt small compared to the scope of the realms, but somehow, in that moment, it held everything that mattered. She inclined her head, her voice soft but resolute. Then we go together. Clara gave a single nod. Always. The wolves stirred from their resting spots, sensing the shift in tone, the promise of motion, the tightening of the bond between them. Eli closed her bracer with a quiet click. I'll coordinate transit through the portal at dawn. We'll make the council chamber by midday. Gunner's hand brushed against Aeliana's as they stood side by side. Guess it's settled. For better or worse, Darren said, reaching for his mug. The pack crashes the council. Clara smirked. Let's try not to start an interrealm incident this time. No promises, Darren muttered. Aeliana's laughter, soft, bright, entirely human in that moment, filled the room. Very well, she said. Tomorrow, then. Outside, the light of Alfheim began to dim toward twilight, painting the sky in silver and rose. The pack lingered together in that fragile peace, knowing that by this time tomorrow, the course of more than one realm might change, but they would face it the only way they knew how, together. Chapter 13. Interlude. The Shattered Verge. The air inside the fortress hung thick with ash and drifting motes of lightless dust. Arc lamps burned low along the obsidian walls, their glow pulsing to a rhythm that was not mechanical but alive, the heartbeat of the realm itself. Beneath the hum came another sound, softer but constant, a ragged breath. Syrian lay on a slab of black glass, her pale hair matted against the stone. Runic wires coiled around her wrists and throat, feeding her the faint shimmer of void energy the mages used to keep her heart steady. When she stirred, the sigils flared violet and hissed. Easy, one of the robed attendants murmured. The word set her teeth on edge. Easy. Nothing about the pain inside her was easy. The burn from the dagger still licked beneath her skin, a river of fire that refused to cool. She could feel the absence inside her where Ultranatius's voice had once lived, a hole large enough to swallow thought. Then the growl came. A low spectral rumble filled the chamber. Shadows bent as Sorvin emerged from the corner, its translucent form rippling like smoke. The beast pressed its muzzle against the edge of the slab, eyes burning with dim blue-black light. Through the bond, Syrian felt the echo of its hunger, its grief, its fury. It was hers. The doors opened. The trader stepped through, his presence drawing the shadows toward him, as though the room itself bowed. He wore no mask today. The black veins along his neck shimmered faintly with silver, the mark of the essence living inside him. Power moved behind his eyes, measured, aware, endless. Awake at last, he said. Syrian's lips cracked into something that might have been a smile. You kept me waiting. You were broken, he replied, tone almost gentle. It took time to put the pieces back together. Her laughter rasped. He cut me. The mortal. His arm burned like a star. The laughter turned sharp. But he's dead now. I felt him die. The trader said nothing. He let the lie sit between them, heavy and comforting. Syrian's eyes narrowed. You saw him fall, didn't you? I saw the portal collapse, he said smoothly. No one survives that kind of light. Satisfied, she sank back against the slab, exhaling a tremor that was half relief, half sorrow. Sorvin lowered its head beside her, the spectral fur rippling with the motion. "I want my son," she whispered. "You promised." The trader approached, his long coat brushing the floor. "And you shall." "He is safe." "Where?" she demanded, sudden tension snapping through the wires. "Take me to him." "Not yet." His voice cut clean through her rising hysteria. "He isn't ready. The blood in him is still unstable. Bring a storm to an infant's cradle and you drown him before he can breathe." Syrian's hands clenched, the runes around her wrists flaring. "I need to see him." "You need to heal," the trader said, and for a heartbeat the glow beneath his skin brightened. A warning, not a threat. "When the time is right, mother and son will meet. For now let him grow beyond the reach of the light that wounded you both." Her fury drained into shaking laughter. "You talk like him." "Perhaps I remember him better than you do." That earned him a glare, but also silence. Syrian turned her face away, eyes fixed on Sorvin's outline in the dark. The beast rumbled low and the air shimmered with heat. She reached out a trembling hand, pressing it to the phantom fur. "When?" she asked, barely a whisper. "Soon," the trader said. "When the realms forget the wolf and the guardian, when the balance grows complacent. Then we reclaim what was taken." He stepped back, the edges of his form already dissolving into the ambient shadow. "Rest, Syrian. Dream of the child. I will wake you when it is time." She watched him fade, then looked to Sorvin. The wolf's eyes blazed faintly, twin mirrors of her own. Through their bond, she felt the promise burn bright. The world would tremble when mother and son were reunited. She smiled into the darkness. "Soon," she whispered. Sorvin's answering growl rolled like distant thunder across the verge. Chapter 14. Of Sparks and Runes. The lab smelled of hot metal and ozone, a clean, sharp tang that made Alethris think of forges he'd known as a child. Deeper fires, older sparks. Overhead, coils throbbed with low blue light. Screens hummed, scattering schematics and glyphs across the stone walls like slow-falling snow. Starbreaker lay in pieces on Eli's central bench, barrel separated from receiver, the rune lattice exposed along the shaft, a half-dozen tiny arbor plates tuned to starlight tucked into a jeweller's tray. Beside it, a cluster of Eli's notebooks bristled with inked equations and glowing glyph sketches, and a larger folding diagram showed the assault rifle frame she'd been refitting. An integrated grenade launcher, channels for 7.62 enchanted rounds, and a small compartment labelled in Eli's cramped script, Neurodestabilizer, prototype. Alethris paused at the mouth of the lab, the game's neon city still reflected on the bench from the forgotten console. He'd laughed at Caleb's insistence at first, introducing an elven artisan to a digital fantasy. But the images on the screen had lodged like seeds. "Fascinating," he murmured, running a fingertip along a rune channel. The runes were tidy, precise, the work of someone who thought in both code and curve. He'd seen similar lattices in Alfheim smith halls, but never one annotated by pulse signatures and neural thresholds. Caleb leaned in the doorway as if he'd been waiting for permission to interrupt. "You okay, Elf?" "You look like we left the cathedral open." Alethris didn't look up. "She's ambitious." He swept Eli's notes with a reverent eye. A grenade launcher integrated with a 7.62 platform is old work. The neurodestabilizer, if Eli could miniaturize the destable fields into a single munition, would be the dangerous part. A 3-in-1 weapon, firepower, penetration, and neural chaos. Caleb's grin widened. "Sounds like exactly the sort of thing Black Dawn would love." "Why are we building it again?" "We're not building it for them," Alethris said softly, and he traced a new line across Eli's blueprint with a stylus. The movement felt like composing, an architect drawing a bridge between two worlds. Eli was designing a modular mount so the platform can accept many chamber types. She planned for safety interlocks and the rune armor that resists void feedback. The destabilizer is the part she guarded most. She wanted to control the range and decay of the field so it incapacitates without destroying. Targeted disruption of synaptic echo. Caleb shrugged, wandering closer to peer at the tray of parts. That neuro thing, how does that even work? Magic voodoo brain stuff? Not voodoo. Alatheris tapped the schematic. A controlled resonant field that interferes with the brain's electrical pathways. In Black Dawn's weapons, it was crude, contact bursts that scramble the mind for minutes. Eli was trying to craft a rune matrix that translates a microburst into a tunable frequency, short stun, memory blur, or sensory overload. The trick is anchoring it without letting the destabilizer feed back into the weapon and corrupt the runes. He stopped, and for the first time a curious light touched his face. He glanced at Starbreaker's exposed runic channels, then up at the profile of the paused game image, the Merc's HUD showing a hand overlay, a quick access slot, a neural link icon pulsing green. Caleb followed his gaze and laughed. So? You gonna steal ideas from the Neon Man now? Alatheris' smile was almost a blade. In that world, weapons are not merely tools. They are extensions of intent. The user thinks, the system reacts. The interface is a conduit. That is a useful metaphor. Metaphor or not, Caleb said, shrugging off his jacket and stepping into the lab proper. You sound dangerously like Eli when she's had 3 hours of sleep and a eureka. Are you about to rewire her baby? I am considering it. Alatheris drew a thin new layer across the blueprints, a neural lattice that bridged the palm node and the weapon port, rune paths that followed the same logic as a circuit bus. Look, if the user's neural impulses can be read and translated into runic activation, if the conduit could be embedded into an existing biometric implant, then a wielder could synchronize intent with the weapon. Caleb clapped his hands together. You mean mind gun, like the game? A more precise phrasing is necessary, Alatheris replied, already sketching. Neural runic conduit. It requires 1. A palm node to sense cutaneous bioelectric potentials, 2. A translator crystal that converts those potentials into rune activation codes, 3. A weapon link port built to accept the translator and a safety seal, the seal of consent, so only authorized signatures can engage. Caleb whistled. Sounds comforting. The elf didn't look pleased by that. He was animated in the way craftsmen become animated, hands moving, eyes bright. He soldered a small loop of filament into the diagram and overlaid a rune that curved like a runic carrette. Gunner's arm already hosts a starlight lattice. If we can interface with that, if we adapt the palm socket into a node, his cybernetic arm becomes the conduit. He has power, stability, and, most importantly, the hardware. Caleb's face changed, respect shading his grin. Of course. The man who already talks to metal, why not let the metal answer back? They fell into a hush, the lab filling with the quiet music of schematics and the distant tick of the portal stabilizer. Alatheris' fingers moved faster, sketching a small socket at the rifle's lower receiver and a matching panel for a forearm implant. He labelled it carefully. Runic node, neural bridge, seal socket. Safety first, Caleb warned. Eli would blast us for messing with a man's headspace without approval. Alatheris paused and tapped the words that would bind any future arrogance. Eli's safety seals will be necessary. A binding rune to prevent runaway resonance. No link without a consent rune. No weapon will engage without the user's stabilized signature. And we implement a dampening feedback. If the neural input spikes beyond safe thresholds, the field collapses and the weapon locks. Caleb's expression sobered. You really thinking about doing this to Gunner? Alatheris looked at the tray where Starbreaker lay, rested in parts. He is already a conduit, Alathris said. It is the perfect test bed because his arm is already integrated with starlight runes. If the conduit succeeds, it will allow him more complete control, faster reaction times, and a method to moderate the destabilizer's effect. We can program safeguards. Caleb rubbed his chin. And if it talks back? Alathris glanced up at him. Then we have failed the art. Then we dismantle our pride and learn. They moved from theory to practice with the clumsy grace of two people who both knew how to make things. Alathris pulled the receiver toward him, aligning Eli's notes beneath the new lattice. He began carving microchannels where the translator crystal would sit, a tiny recessed well at the stock's base. Sparks flew where his tools kissed metal, and the lab filled with the scent of singed copper. Caleb fetched vials, components, a cache of translator crystals Eli had harvested from a Concordian node. Desera walked in then, wiping her hands on a rag, nodding at the workbench. You two inventing the next apocalypse in here. Caleb grinned. Just bridging worlds, mate. Desera's eyes lingered on the disassembled Starbreaker. Eli's gonna have our heads if she sees you messing with her baby. She'll be furious, Alathris said honestly. Then she will be intrigued. We will apologize later. Jewel slipped in behind Des, carrying a small tray of charms, vials etched with healing runes. If you're going to poke at neural bands, don't forget the med side. A spike without a dampener will fry a synapse in a hurry. I'll design the emergency triage charm. Alathris nodded, grateful. We will build the charm into the seal. The seal will cut the link and apply emergency dampening. He turned back to the bench, eyes flicking toward the disassembled starlight plates on the tray. But it will need a direct interface. Gunner's cybernetic arm already carries the starlight circuits. If we embed the control rune in his palm, we can use the existing conduits to complete the circuit. The palm becomes the activator, thought to motion, intent to command. Caleb leaned against the doorframe, smirking. So you're giving him a magic trigger in his hand. Why stop there? Build him an eye too, like a HUD. Show him weapon status, target overlays, ammo count. You know, go full cyber elf. Alathris paused, genuinely considering it. That is an excellent idea, but such an interface would require synchronization between the optic nerve and runic feedback loops. Aeliana and Eli would need to be involved. Eli especially. Neural optics are her domain. Caleb grinned. So that's a not yet then. For now, Alathris said with the faintest smile, I will design the palm lattice. The eye will wait. They worked through the afternoon, Alathris sketching, Caleb fabricating mock housings, Des measuring tolerances, Jewel double-checking the biological thresholds. The plan began to feel less like fantasy and more like a dangerous, beautiful tool. In a quiet moment, Alathris palmed one of Starbreaker's arbor plates, feeling the faint hum of starlight runes. He closed his eyes and laid the idea before the metal. A bridge between thought and light. A weapon that listens to a steady hand and calms in the face of panic. Caleb watched him, amusement and something like wonder on his face. If this works, Gunner's gonna think we've given him a second soul. Alathris smiled, not unkindly. Perhaps. Or perhaps we will finally turn a soldier's reflex into something the worlds can trust. When at last they stepped back and the first mock lattice lay sketched across Eli's plan, the paused neon city on the screen seemed to wink at them like a guilty ally. Tomorrow, Caleb said, straightening, we find Gunner and get permission. If anyone has the right to wear that, it's him. Alathris set his stylus down, glancing toward the lab's window where the edge of Alfheim's sky, pale impossible, hung above the horizon like a promise. Then we prepare. Outside, the forge of the world hummed on. Inside, a new kind of light began to take shape. 1 part rune, 1 part wire, braided by hands that could make both sing. Chapter 15. Threads of the Evening. The sun in Alfheim didn't set so much as dissolve. its light breaking into drifting gold and violet shards that shimmered across the walls of Aeliana's home. The silver trees outside whispered in the warm breeze, and the air smelled faintly of crushed petals and rain. Inside, laughter rolled through the front hall, Darren's deep and unrestrained. "All right," he said, holding his arms out like a man bracing for impact. "But if this thing has lace or bells, I'm walking straight back to Earth." Across from him, a thin, elven tailor in a cobalt tunic adjusted his spectacles and looked up from the measuring tape draped around his neck. "Lace is ceremonial," he said politely. "Bells are optional." Gunnar leaned against the doorway, arms folded, a rare grin tugging at his mouth. "Just stand still, Darren. You'll ruin the man's work." "I'm ruining my reputation. That's what I'm ruining." Darren shot him a glare. "You set me up, didn't you?" "I said I'd make the appointment," Gunnar replied, unbothered. "Didn't say what for." Clara, sitting on the arm of a nearby chair, tried not to laugh. "You should have seen it coming. He's been waiting all day for this." Darren groaned. "Figures. Commander of the pack, saviour of the realms, and this is how I die. Smothered in elven fabric." The tailor ignored the banter entirely. He circled Darren with the precision of a surgeon, murmuring notes under his breath. "Broad shoulders," he said thoughtfully. "We shall require more fabric. Perhaps reinforced threading at the seams." "Reinforced?" Darren said. "Am I going to battle or a wedding?" "Both, possibly," Gunnar said. That earned another glare, but even Darren couldn't hold it long. Aeliana entered from the adjoining room, her presence soft as light through water. She carried a tray with glasses of pale wine, setting it on the low table beside Clara. "It's only fitting," she said, "that the best man be properly dressed for the ceremony." For a heartbeat, Darren just stared. Then he laughed. Genuine, disbelieving laughter. "You sly bastard, you set the appointment before asking me." "Efficiency," Gunnar said. "Eli would approve." Clara was grinning now. "He's not wrong." The tailor stepped back, satisfied, and made a final note on his floating ledger. "I will return in 2 days for fitting. The design will complement the Alpha's attire while maintaining appropriate human structure." "Human structure," Darren muttered. "Translation? Baggy so I don't break it." Aeliana smiled. "You'll look distinguished. I promise." Darren sighed, shaking his head. "If anyone asks, I was drugged." "Duly noted," Clara said. The tailor bowed to Aeliana, his robe whispering softly as he departed into the evening. When the door closed behind him, the laughter lingered. For a moment, the house felt less like a sanctuary and more like a home. Gunnar poured the last of the wine and handed Darren a glass. "For the record," he said, "you earned this. You've had my back since before half these people knew my name. I can't do this without you standing there." Darren studied him for a beat, the humour fading to something steadier. "Yeah," he said quietly. "You can. But you don't have to." They clinked glasses. The moment held. From the corner, Clara lifted her own drink. "To the Alpha and the Guardian," she said, half teasing, half sincere. "May the council survive the wedding." "Barely," Darren muttered, raising his glass. Aeliana smiled, her gaze soft on them all, her family her bridge between worlds. Outside, the light of Alfheim drifted toward dusk, painting the room in silver and gold. For once, there was no prophecy, no war, no strategy. Just laughter, friendship, and the faint promise of tomorrow.